Yo, what's up, Quirk Chronicles crew? Today, we're diving into an epic what if. What if Deku awakened a precognition quirk? This one's packed with intense moments, high-stakes decisions, and Deku redefining heroism like never before. So, smash that like button, share this with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories. Alright, let's dive into this future-seeing adventure. Izuku knew that Kaken would burn one of his hero journals that day. That was why he copied the most recent one, filled out just enough pages for Kaken to flip through, snort in disgust, and blow it to pieces in front of him. Izuku knew how to show just enough despair to sell the act, and he knew that Kaken and his other friends would watch him fish the charred book out of the school's koi pond. Izuku also knew not to take his usual way home, instead taking a detour through the busier part of town around the quiet underpass he liked. Part of him wanted to linger and observe, to see why he wasn't taking that route today, but he didn't want to be late. Izuku knew that trying to tell anyone that he, Izuku Midoriya, had a quirk, and that quirk was the ability to see his own future up to and including his death, would only result in a painful migraine that threatened to blot out everything he could see. Living with the taunts and harassment wasn't nearly so bad when he could see it all coming, like bracing before getting punched in the face. It wasn't a future he could see, but a gut feeling, a pit of dread in his stomach that kept him from even telling his mother about his ability. There was only one future for him, and it hadn't changed since he first saw it the morning after he was diagnosed quirkless, though he had tried to fight it when he was younger. Izuku knew that, at 4:05 p.m., shortly after class that Friday, a villain with a slime quirk would ambush Kaken in an alleyway near his favorite arcade. Izuku knew that he would arrive just in time to shove Kaken aside. Izuku knew that he would be smothered to death as the villain stole his body. He knew that the morning before walking to school that day would be the last time he told his mother he loved her. He knew he would never live to be a hero, but at least he could die a hero. And after that point, Izuku only saw darkness. So, when Izuku was seconds away from his self-appointed death, vision blurring, brain screaming from lack of oxygen, the acrid taste of the villain burning his mouth, ribs groaning under the internal pressure of the villain shoving itself inside of him, he was surprised when a precise, well-placed punch to the gut made him spew up gallons of slime villain. Izuku took sweet, delicious gulps of air and looked up hazily at his savior. All Might, tall, gleaming, in the flesh, perfectly silhouetted by the setting sun, the symbol of peace himself, All Might. Tears ran down Izuku's cheeks at the sight of him. "Are you all right, young man?" his hero asked. Izuku tried to speak, but all that came out of his mouth was a rasping wheeze. All Might's smile faltered a touch, a movement so imperceptible that only years of observing the man's every public movement gave Izuku the ability to see it. "Don't worry, take deep breaths. You're safe now." All Might waved over paramedics in white uniforms. "These fine people will take care of you." As the paramedics helped him onto a stretcher, Izuku reached out, grazing the fabric on All Might's arm. He tried calling his name, but he could only cough. "What is it, young man?" All Might's eyes went to the charred, soggy book poking out from his bag. "Oh, of course. I have a pin on me somewhere." The ink ran a little bit on the damp page, but Izuku didn't care. He had All Might's signature. Distracted as he was, Izuku missed his chance to ask his hero how he changed the future as the doors of the ambulance slammed shut. An oxygen mask was strapped over Izuku's face. As his heart rate ebbed and his breathing slowed, he felt a new future creep into his consciousness, filling the void he had sensed earlier. He saw a kindly doctor run X-rays and MRIs, scanning his lungs and intestinal tract for signs of internal bleeding, verifying that his ribs weren't broken, checking for signs of dead brain tissue. He saw his mom, tears pouring down her face and snot dripping from her nose, sobbing into his shirt as she thanked God and All Might for saving her son. He saw that Kaken wouldn't be there. He saw that he'd be released from the hospital that night, and they'd get Katsudon, even though his mom would grimace as she emptied out her wallet. To his relief, the night went exactly as predicted, comfortably full, and still a bit sore from the attack. Izuku sat in bed as the new future trickled into his brain. He laughed as the brilliance of the universe's cosmic joke, played at his expense, came into focus in his mind. He wasn't mad. A single day as a UA Hero Course student was worth the admission price of aching muscles and popped blisters. He saw himself cleaning a beach, bones popping and muscles burning as he pulled a refrigerator up a set of stairs, running with a tire under each arm, breaking apart a rusted oven with swings of a sledgehammer, loading and unloading garbage into a pickup truck, looking out at a sunrise over the shimmering water. Gorgeous white sand exposed out from under the mountain of trash, newfound muscles stretching as the wind caressed them. By the end of that summer, he had calloused hands, a clean beach, and killer six-pack abs. He knew what those muscles were for. He had applied to UA, thinking at the time he'd never live to see the front doors, that his pre-death application was the closest he could hope to becoming a hero. Seeing them was just as impressive the second time. The written test eclipsed anything he had ever seen in middle school, but he knew how to answer for a passing score. He never thought he would get to hear Present Mike in person. Despite knowing every detail of the entrance exam, he drank in every word of the pro hero's explanation, blissfully unfiltered by the limitations of audio equipment. He knew he would ordinarily never stand a chance against other heroes to be in a free-for-all against killer robots, but his quirk showed him the improbable path forward. He ordered pruning shears, a delicate piece of cutting equipment just long and thin enough to slip past the robot's outer armor. He made a makeshift riot shield from an old Lexan guard on the beach, just heavy enough to block the robot's rubber bullets. When the entrants gathered outside Battle Center B, Izuku sprinted for the doors and threw them open while everyone else was milling about. He heard shouts of, "Hey, that's cheating," as he left them behind. But from the observation tower, Present Mike shouted back, "Cheating? There's no starting signal for hero work. You just get to it. Now move." Between the head start and the jostling at the doors, Izuku had plenty of time to run ahead. He saw which path to take to run into the most robots, where and when to hold up his shield, and how to angle his pruning shears to slip past the armor and snip their main power cable like a bomb defusal squad. The other applicants quickly overtook him, but even then, he found more points taking out robots they hadn't noticed or hadn't quite finished off. By the time the zero-pointer arrived, Izuku had 32 points. He knew that it wouldn't be enough on its own. With a girl trapped under rubble within 20 feet of him, Izuku knew that all he had to do was dig her out and drag her to safety to get another 56 rescue points. He knew that his mother would grasp him with shaking arms and cry tears of joy into his shoulder when he told her he had made it. He knew Kakin would be livid to the point of exploding like a foul-mouthed firecracker that quirkless, pathetic Deku dared to score higher than him. He knew the other students, hero course and general studies alike, would give him disapproving looks, whisper about how he cheated, and even continue the same harassment he had endured in middle school, albeit constrained by the teacher's vigilance and low tolerance for bullying. They would gloat about how quickly he had fallen. What Izuku didn't know was the faculty's reactions as they watched his progress through the battle center. Settled into theater seating, with a couple dozen screens arranged in front of them, the principal and 6 members of the faculty watched the entrance exam unfold from every possible perspective. Each teacher had a remote and their own screen, allowing them to rewind and rewatch video feed from different cameras. Battle Arena B drew the attention of many teachers, in no small part because Nizu had spread word that the one quirkless applicant would be competing there. "Why did you allow his requests?" Shota asked as he watched Izuku pull the pruning shears out of his pants. Samimtus squinted at the screen and asked, "Is that a piece of plastic he's holding?" Nizu smiled and brought out Izuku's requisition forms. Izuku requested that he be allowed to bring a pair of pruning shears and a homemade riot shield. His request was approved, since he claimed his quirk required them to properly fight. "But he doesn't have a quirk," Ectoplasm pointed out, "which is what makes it so clever. I can't prove his quirk doesn't require those items to begin with if I can't prove what his quirk does." Shota scowled. "That's just a loophole and you know it." Nizu gave the teacher a shit-eating hamster dog bear grin. "I suppose it is. Then why?" "I was curious." Shota waited, but Nizu said nothing else. "That's it." He asked for the exact 2 items I would have asked for, being in his shoes and knowing exactly what the test would be. "Of course I'm curious. What does that mean?" "I have a feeling we're about to find out." They watched as Izuku bolted for the doors and raced towards the nearest robot. Izuku held the plastic guard in front of him, deflecting the rubber bullets upward. The pruning shears darted forward, sliding through a chink in the 2-pointer's armor and snipping a single wire. As Izuku's point tally hit the double digits, Shota leaned forward, entranced by the skill, or lack thereof, on display. The boy's toned body suggested arduous exercise, and his movements allowed him to dodge every attack. But there was a lack of grace to his steps, an imbalance, struggling to keep his footing during one lunge, nearly falling over when he made a sharp turn that screamed of inexperience. Shota wasn't the only hero glued to Izuku's screen. The other pro heroes let out startled comments as the quirkless nobody passed most of his peers with a gardening tool and a miniature plastic door. "I wonder who trained him," Midnight muttered. "He's good." "I don't know," Vlad King said. "There's something weird about how he's fighting. I can't put my finger on it." All Might leaned closer and said, "I feel like I've seen him somewhere." "Well, Nizu," Shota asked, "what do you think?" The principal hummed tunelessly and took a sip of tea. "I'm stumped." The other teachers turned towards him in surprise. "You? Stumped?" Shota asked. "He isn't taking the optimal path. Theoretically, had he gone east instead of west, he could have had 45 points by now. Then again, the 0-pointers west as well." Nizu chuckled and pressed the red button. "I wonder if he knows about the rescue points." Shota watched Izuku carefully. There was no surprise in the kid's face, no startled jump, not even a reflexive flinch as the 0-pointer demolished a 4-story building with its fist. A girl, Ochako, if he remembered right, was trapped under falling rubble. Izuku had been running towards her before the first brick even hit the ground, and he didn't even change course as he ran up to her and dug her out. "Wow, he didn't even hesitate," Cementos whispered. "That kid's got my 10, Vlad King said as he raised his point card. Midnight, Ectoplasm, and Cementos followed suit. Shota hesitated, his hand on one of the lower numbers, looking between his co-workers and the boy on screen. "Something the matter?" Nizu asked. Before Shota could answer, All Might said, "I don't know. My gut's telling me there's something not quite right about Izuku, like there's something missing." "Really?" Blood King asked. He stopped hunting robots to help her out. "I think that's exactly what we're looking for. I think it's his expression. I don't know. I guess it's just a feeling." All Might sighed and put a 10 in the air. Shota looked down at his selection of numbers. Trusting his own gut, he held up a 6. Cementos laughed. "Harsh as ever, Shota. I have a gut feeling as well, and unlike All Might, I trust it over the opinions of others." All Might looked abashed, but he didn't lower his number. "Well, that still leaves him with 56 rescue points," Nizu said. "With that alone, he'd pass with flying colors, but combined with the villain points, well, looks like he's at the top of the class." "Ironic, don't you think?" Midnight shook her head. "That kid's something else. Quirkless, unremarkable school record, and he beat everyone else by a mile? Seems like he was too prepared." "Even if he knew what would be on the test," Ectoplasm pointed out, "the fact remains that he was still able to defeat the villains without taking a scratch, and he went out of his way to save another student. He earned his spot." Mutters of agreement went across the room. After they had finished grading the other students, the faculty filed out of the observation room, either heading home or getting work done. As Nizu went back to his office, Shota trailed after him. "He knew about the rescue points," Shota said when they were alone. "Certainly," Nizu cheerfully replied. "I'm curious to see how he'll do in your class." "You're letting me have him?" "Of course. He'll benefit more from having you teach him, given his disadvantage." Shota scowled. "And if I think he doesn't have what it takes?" Nizu paused. "Send him to Gen Ed. I'd like to keep an eye on him." "Still haven't figured out how he did it?" "I only have theories at this point. I'll need your help in narrowing it down." They reached Nizu's office. The principal opened the door for Shota. He reluctantly accepted a cup of black tea and settled into the chair opposite Nizu. "I think Izuku has a quirk." Shota stopped with the cup of tea halfway to his mouth. "How is he not registered?" "He was diagnosed as quirkless at the age of 4. Doctors found the extra toe joint. It's a generally accepted sign of quirklessness, but it's mostly just a myth." Nizu had a mischievous twinkle in his eye as he said, "The real question is why he hasn't told anyone about it. It's an advantage. Nobody can counter a quirk if they don't know what it is." Nizu shook his head. "Quirkless kids in his age group stick out. Sad as it is, they're common targets for bullying and harassment, and depending on the school system, the teachers may overlook or even encourage that behavior." Shota's grip tightened on his cup. The mere mention of bullying made his blood boil, even years after his own troubled school life. Did Izuku go to such a school? Unfortunately, which brings me to my point. Exactly how much did Izuku value the secrecy of his quirk that he was willing to endure years of harassment, to the point of physical violence, death threats, vandalism, verbal harassment, and whatever else the minds of children can conceive? Either someone, or something, told him to keep his quirk a secret, or he thought no one would believe him even if he said anything, which I'm afraid is all too likely given the doctor's diagnosis. Shota let out a deep breath. So, what do you think Izuku's quirk is? Some form of precognition, like night eye? Shota felt the realization settle into place, like finding a corner piece of a jigsaw puzzle and seeing how everything else fit together. That's how he was able to dodge and block everything. Nizu smiled at him from behind his cup of tea. Fits nicely, doesn't it? When should we confront him about it? That's the problem. Nizu finished his cup and stared mournfully at the dregs. If we do decide to confront him about it, he will know well in advance, and he will either come up with a defense to prevent us from learning anything, or avoid the confrontation entirely, much like how he could avoid and disarm every robot the test threw at him. Then we can't give him time to dodge. I'm afraid he has all the time he needs. Nizu took a stack of papers out from his desk drawer. He sent in the request for the pruning shears and riot shield 3 weeks ago. If he knew he'd need them so far in advance, he likely knows and is already prepared for whatever we would do. Going off when he bought the shears, we can extend his range of precognition to 5 weeks. I have a feeling it may be even longer than that. Shota felt his hackles rise. 5 weeks? Night Eye doesn't go farther than a couple days. He can, but the visions lose clarity. Whether or not Izuku's purely hypothetical quirk has the same limitation remains to be seen. The emphasis on the hypothetical nature of Izuku's quirk reigned in Shota's excitement. We still need to prove he has the quirk, correct? All we have is guesswork. I've thought of several other explanations for how Izuku could have performed so well. The precognitive quirk is just the simplest. Then what should we do? Erase his quirk and see what happens. Shota considered the plan as he drank some tea. It had bite to it, but compared to his favored quadruple espresso, it may as well be warm milk. Won't he see that coming as well? Probably, but it's as good a first step as any. As long as we don't directly confront him, I don't think he'll slip away. Shota raised an eyebrow. You think he could escape your surveillance system? If his precognition is as powerful as I think it might be, probably. He threaded the needle perfectly on the entrance exam and achieved the highest possible score. In all probability, with his quirk, he could predict his way out of any net I could weave. You think he's dangerous? Nizu beamed at him. All our students are dangerous, Mr. Aizawa. It's our job to make sure they don't endanger innocent lives. He glanced at his watch and said, I have some reports to send out. Have a good night. Shota set his empty cup on the table and drew his capture scarf around his face. Keep a spot in Gen Ed open. I'm expelling one during orientation. Once the door was shut, Nizu brought out more files on Izuku, medical records since his birth, report cards and teacher's notes, the Midoriya family's tax forms and spending history, everything that could feed into his high spec. As each fact fit into the predictive model he had constructed in his mind, he felt Izuku's quirk take shape in the logical void the model diverted around, like an object hidden just below the river's surface that split the current. He suspected it was a boulder, but it could have been a log or a sunken boat, and without dredging up the foreign object, he would never know for sure what it would be. The mystery of it gave him an intoxicating thrill. As Nizu perused Izuku Midoriya's life history, he wondered what had brought the boy to the alleyway by a popular arcade at 4:05 p.m. one Friday afternoon. The morning Izuku packed his bags for his first day at UA felt surreal. His mother wept tears of joy as she rounded up his textbooks and school supplies, and as if the tears were contagious, he started crying with her. He felt guilty, knowing he would disappoint her on the first day, after they had splurged on Katsudon to celebrate. Worse still was the feeling of dread that had been building up in him since he had woken up that morning. His new future was murky beyond his imminent expulsion from the hero course, possibly a side effect from having the future reset on him, but he knew that UA would get attacked by villains at some point, and further beyond that, villainy would rise in the background of his new life. The news would cover villainy attacks on a daily basis, people would shun the streets out of fear of being the next victim, and the heroes would stretch themselves thin, fighting a losing battle to save a society tearing itself inside out. Izuku hoped it wouldn't take long to get back to normal. Letting the goodbyes and tearful hugs drag out as long as he could, Izuku took the latest possible train to UA, arriving late as he did. He only had to slip by a handful of students before making it to classroom 1A. Anyone that saw him was too busy making sure they weren't late to their own classes to bother him. The timing of his arrival couldn't have been better. Kaken and the guy with glasses that had called him out on mumbling to himself during present mix explanation were in an argument over the merits of their respective middle schools. Uraraka made a beeline straight for Izuku, introduced herself, thanked him profusely for helping her during the exam and congratulating him on passing, which drew the attention of the entire class. Some students smiled at him, some studied him impassively, but most had sour frowns that promised hostility. Kaken was halfway out of his seat when their homeroom teacher cleared his throat. Everyone stared in shock at the bedraggled man in the yellow sleeping bag as he scooted his way over to the teacher's podium, stood up, and unzipped the sleeping bag like a moth emerging from its chrysalis. Even having the benefit of knowing the teacher's face ahead of time, and knowing he had to be a pro-hero, Izuku searched through his hero journals and online forums had come up with nothing on him. That narrowed it down to the underground heroes, which had proven difficult to research given their tendency to avoid the spotlight. 8 seconds. That's how much time you wasted before being quiet. Their teacher pulled a sack of uniforms out of his sleeping bag and tossed it on his desk. Put on your tracksuits and meet me outside. The other students gawked as Izuku stripped out of his clothes right there in the classroom, threw on a tracksuit, and sprinted out to the training grounds. His quirk gave him the benefit of knowing exactly where he would find his teacher. The teacher glanced at his watch as Izuku ran up to him. That's a new record. Heroes need to respond quickly to emergencies. Izuku answered. He knew the answer would get a subtle smile from his teacher, though it wouldn't stop the inevitable outcome of the quirk assessment. Kaken had made it seconds after him, the shirt of his track suit on backwards, winded from trying to beat Izuku outside. Spiky red hair and guy with tail weren't far behind, followed by a large clump of guys, one of whom was carrying a short kid with bulbous hair under one muscled arm, holding him easily despite the smaller boy's furious attempts to head back inside the school. The girls made it outside 2 minutes later, most giving purple hair disapproving scowls. 1 minute and 36 seconds, their teacher said. That's the time of the first student to arrive. 5 minutes and 35 seconds. That's how long it took all of you to arrive. One of the girls stepped forward. You expect us to get changed in front of that creep? She asked, pointing at the shorter student. The teacher gave the offending kid a stern frown, but he said to the class, 48 seconds. That's the average time it takes for a mugger to assault their target and make their escape. Depending on their quirk and the surrounding environment, you might not even have half that time. A girl with jacks sticking out of her earlobes stepped forward. She couldn't quite meet the teacher's eyes. Still, asking us to change in front of the boys? I'm not asking you to go that far. From now on, I expect you all to get changed in your respective locker rooms. With another glare at the bulbous hair boy, he added, I will not tolerate any form of sexual harassment in my classroom, and should I receive complaints, I will expel you. Is that clear? His stern tone compelled nods out of the whole class. Glasses held a hand high in the air and asked, May I speak, sir? The teacher sighed and said, Go ahead. Aren't we supposed to be at orientation right now? That's what the syllabus says we're doing today. An illogical waste of time. I have 3 years to teach you how to be heroes, and I'm not going to waste a single second on something so frivolous as introductions. Do it on your own time. I see. Then what are we doing out here? I'm glad you asked, Ida. The teacher tossed Kaken a baseball. You had to do fitness tests in middle school, correct? This time, you'll be using your quirks. Once you know where you start, you know where you can improve. So, go ahead and give it a try. Kaken's explosion-powered throw went 750 meters, to the amazement of the crowd. The students grew excited. When the pink-skinned girl gushed about how fun it was going to be, the teacher frowned. Izuku braced for what was about to come. Looks fun, huh? You think this is just a game? The teacher's insidious grin chilled the whole class, Izuku included. How about this? Whoever comes in last place across all 8 tests will be expelled. At first, the class stared at their teacher in shock. Gradually, heads turned towards Izuku. A few people grinned to themselves, no doubt imagining the same result Izuku already knew was coming. Expelled on the first day? A kid with yellow hair asked. Isn't that a bit much? This is UA. The teachers here are given free rein to teach how they see fit. The way I see it, it's better to have you expelled than killed by some 2-bit villain. He gestured at the nearby track and said, we'll start with sprints. Get moving. Izuku's work over the summer had paid off, for in each event, he had set a new personal record. Despite the progress, months of pushing himself couldn't compete against the years of rigorous training the other students had. He came dead last on the sprints and hovered in the bottom 5 for everything else. While everyone had at least one test they excelled in, from using acid to slide across the 50-meter dash to asking a bird to carry the baseball. Even students without beneficial quirks, such as the invisible girl, outclassed Izuku with pure physical conditioning. By the last event, the ball toss, it became evident to the whole class that Izuku wouldn't make the cut. Ochako and the others with acid and hardening quirks cheered him on as he stepped into the circle, but the rest heaved sighs of relief. Meanwhile, the teacher watched him, impassive, no doubt having already decided to expel the quirkless failure. Izuku buried his rising anger and shame, resolving not to let himself cry. He knew he wouldn't, not when he had seen this coming before he had even started. As Izuku raised his arm, he realized that he couldn't see himself throwing the ball clearly. Everything up to that point had been crystal clear, everything after the toss hazy, like a dream half remembered as he went for a glass of water. Gritting his teeth, Izuku wound back and threw the ball with everything he had. Black. The repository of future knowledge went dark, as if someone had yanked a television's cord out from the socket. Izuku froze mid-throw, the ball flying limply from his fingertips to land a measly 10 meters away. Deprived of the knowledge his quirk offered, he couldn't be sure, but he could have sworn it was supposed to be a 50-meter toss. For once in his life, he had no idea what to do. Terror set in. He felt the world spiraling out from under him. His breathing quickened. His heart thumped against his ribcage like a trapped animal. Sight and sound were muffled until the present moment threatened to slip away like his future. Izuku could feel the eyes on him, judging, questioning, mocking, pitying. He had to do something, say something. He turned towards his teacher. His hair and scarf hovered around him, revealing glowing red eyes and a pair of yellow goggles. The hours spent on internet forums came back to him, and in a moment of clarity, he had figured out what had happened to him. Izuku stammered wildly as he said, "You're Eraserhead." Mr. Aizawa's eyes widened with surprise, but he didn't blink. "How do you know that name?" As the teacher grew suspicious, Izuku felt his brain melting. Izuku cursed the fact that, out of anything that could have possibly come out of his mouth that moment, he had to have picked the worst possible thing to say. Now Eraserhead had to know he had a quirk he had hidden from the quirk registry, an illegally unregistered quirk that he had used to cheat his way into UA. Izuku took a deep breath and clenched his hands. Eraserhead couldn't keep his eyes open forever, but until he blinked, Izuku had to salvage the situation. Somehow, he made himself make eye contact with the teacher, though the stammer stayed in his voice and his thoughts remained in disarray. "Sorry, sir. I was trying to figure it out throughout class today. I knew you had to be a pro hero of some kind, but I didn't have any idea who you were. I figured you were an underground hero, though I didn't know for sure which one, because there's not a lot of info out there on underground heroes. That's kind of the point, and you're rambling," the teacher cut in. "Don't waste time." Izuku felt himself blush. "Sorry. Bad habit. Anyways, I figured it out mid-throw, and I kinda got surprised." He could feel the raw skepticism in his teacher's expression as he raised a single eyebrow. "You just figured it out? Right now?" "It's the goggles," Izuku said, pointing to the eyewear hanging around Eraserhead's neck. "They're to keep villains from knowing where you're looking at any given moment, so they don't know whose quirk you are erasing." Izuku wondered if it was wise to mention Mr. Aizawa's quirk, whether or not it would make him look more suspicious if he mentioned what that quirk is, or hope that his teacher will think he didn't realize Eraserhead has a quirk-erasing gaze. Since it's what the hero's most well-known for, Izuku decided to include it. The teacher held his gaze for what felt like an eternity. Izuku felt himself wavering before the teacher's cold, calculating expression. "I see," Mr. Aizawa said. He closed his eyes. Izuku felt the future come rushing back in, like a river that broke its dam, and nearly wept with relief. Mr. Aizawa tossed him another baseball. Startled, Izuku fumbled the catch. "Since I would like an accurate baseline of your physical capabilities," Eraserhead said, "and I would like to think you can throw a ball more than 10 meters, you may try again. Don't waste any more time." There were a few snickers from the crowd as Izuku wound up another pitch. This time, Izuku got the 50 meters he had previously predicted, a personal best, but still at the bottom of the class. As the class gathered around Mr. Aizawa, expectantly waiting for the test results, Izuku braced himself for his impending expulsion. His vision of the future rushed forward, giving him vertigo as he tried to make sense of the information overload. Eraserhead displayed the results, showing Izuku in dead last, as expected. "All right, let's head back to class." Those weren't the words Izuku remembered. Raising a shaky hand, Izuku asked, "Excuse me, Mr. Aizawa, what about me? Didn't you hear what I just said? Head back to class." Kaken's hands popped with miniature explosions as he glared at the teacher. "What? You're not going to expel the worthless shrimp?" "Nope. I was lying about the expulsion." The class erupted in an uproar. Izuku, for his part, was too stunned to say a word. What had happened to the outcome he had seen before his quirk was erased? Now that he felt calmer, he could see the future take shape. A future where he stayed in the hero course, despite his failure. What had changed? How? Why? Silence, all of you. Eraserhead's words cut the chatter like a knife. It was a logical ruse to draw out your full potential. Anyone who can't operate under pressure doesn't have what it takes to be a hero. Now let's go. Izuku could feel himself breaking on the inside. As his future crept outward, he was 5 again. Rolling on the floor as 10 years of bullying and a death by suffocation played out while the All Might video played on loop above him. 2 fingers on his left hand snapped, and he could feel shards of bone grinding against one another as he moved his hand. Izuku choked on his scream. Desperate to break away from the crowd before the pain got worse, he took the out his quirk showed him. I need to use the restroom. Is that okay?" Eraserhead studied him carefully, with an emotion on his face that Izuku couldn't read. "Make it quick. We have work to do." "Yes, sir." Izuku sprinted to the nearest restroom, locked the stall, and collapsed onto the toilet seat. Sobs broke out of him, and tears ran down his face as the future spread outward. A dull echo of the pain from breaking fingers lingered in his left hand, and his right itched from a burn. As his future crept outward, exhaustion deadened his muscles, making him too weak to move. Each day of his new future weakened him, until he felt a bone-deep exhaustion that made him want to close his eyes. The panic he had held back with everything he had came rushing in full force, a feeling of helplessness and confusion from having his entire future ripped out from under him like a tablecloth. He couldn't imagine how people could live like that, not knowing what their every action would entail, how to speak, how to act, where to walk. Every minute detail laid out for him in a picture-perfect script. The anger and fear of the present grappled with the exhaustion of the future, sending his heart into an arrhythmic patter. The future had changed. Again. He still wasn't sure what had happened the first time, but this time, his quirk had been erased. For just a moment, he couldn't see what he was supposed to do. He had messed up. He had given in to panic, and now, Eraserhead knew he had a quirk Izuku wasn't supposed to show him, and somehow, it had changed what was supposed to happen. Anger simmered inside Izuku. For the first time in his life, he felt that he could hate a hero, even Endeavor, for all his sour attitude and rudeness, could be respected for his tireless efforts to apprehend villains. But his teacher changed his mind about how much Izuku was worth because he had a quirk. He was supposed to expel him, bottom of the class, quirkless, weak loser he was. The only thing that could have changed his mind was his quirk. It explained the sudden shift in his future perfectly. As he huddled into a ball on the toilet, chest bursting with anger and hysteria, his new death came to him. Swirling black void, villains on a ship, a nightmarish monster with unfocused eyes, a hand reaching for him from darkness. The classmates and heroes gathered at the center plaza, safe, the villains ready to retreat. Izuku felt his skull ripping itself apart. Each fleck of skin, flesh, and bone that turned to dust drove another lance of pain through his head. Izuku stuffed a hand in his mouth, stifling the scream that tore itself from his throat. After what felt like an eternity, the pain stopped. Izuku picked himself up off the bathroom floor with shaking arms, breathing deeply. Tooth marks bit painfully into his hand, almost drawing blood, but the pain was distant, numbed by his having felt it already. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to prepare before villains will attack his school and try to kill his classmates and his teacher. He didn't have time to cry. He washed his face in the sink and let his hair hang low to hide his puffy, red eyes. On his way back to class, he took a detour to the library and checked out a book on sign language. Izuku hoped that, this time, that the future wouldn't change on him. Once Shoyuta had the rest of his students back in their seats, he told them, "I need to speak with the principal for a bit. Pick your class representatives before I get back." "But we just met each other," Momo said. "We don't even know each other's names." "Then fix that." As he left, he heard one student ask, "Did he even say when he'd be back?" Shoyuta didn't trouble himself to give them a time limit. If they couldn't handle being left alone, he'd just expel some of them. The teacher's lounge was empty. Half a pot of coffee was left in the machine, lukewarm and gritty. Shoyuta drank it anyways. The influx of caffeine did nothing for the sheer emotional exhaustion he felt at that moment. He sank into a chair and rested his head in his hands, thinking about the expression Izuku had as he froze his quirk, twisted a knife in his chest. He had seen countless reactions to quirk erasure over the years: anger, shock, even fear. But never had he seen someone look so lost, so terrified, so close to having a full-blown panic attack that he had readied his capture scarf to keep him from collapsing. As a teacher, he knew he had to instill respect, sometimes even fear, in his students. Despite what the media portrayed, the world was not a kind place to heroes, and any that weren't ready when they left his care would have their throats slit within a month, their deaths buried underneath the latest news report on All Might. The thought of seeing one of his former students left in some garbage bin in an alley kept him awake some nights. He had seen traumatized students, some even in his own class, shaken by a close encounter with a villain or a class exercise gone wrong, but never in all his years teaching at UA had he ever personally traumatized one of his students. It made him feel sick inside. Worse was the visible, Herculean effort Izuku had shown forcing that terror back, mustering every scrap of courage he had to meet Eraserhead's quirk-erasing gaze head-on. Shoyuta had never been so simultaneously horrified and awestruck to see someone so young and so small stand tall in the face of debilitating fear. After seeing that kind of courage, how could he expel him? After forcing some drops into his eyes, Shoyuta went to Nizu's office. The principal already had a cup of tea waiting for him. "You just had to do it outside, didn't you?" Nizu asked. "Do you realize I don't have good camera angles out there?" "You were right. Midoriya has a quirk." "You're sure about that?" "Midoriya reacted the instant I erased his quirk," Shoyuta said. He tried not to think about the slow, dawning horror that twisted Izuku's features as the ball flopped to the ground. Nizu tsuked. "Well, there goes my theory." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. If Midoriya could foresee the future, like Night Eye, wouldn't he have known that you would erase his quirk?" Shoyuta washed the coffee grit off his tongue with a mouthful of tea as he pondered Nizu's point. "So, if his quirk isn't foresight, what is it?" "Hard to say. Either it's a foresight quirk with mechanics not immediately obvious, or his quirk is something else entirely. Maybe an intelligence quirk. I really hope it's an intelligence quirk. I've been looking for someone to play Go with. Chess is too boring." Nizu sighed and sipped his tea. "Either way, we'll need to do more tests." "No." Nizu paused. "Is something the matter?" Whatever I did terrified Izuku so badly he looked ready to pass out. Shoyuta closed his eyes and took a deep breath, calming himself so he wouldn't start shouting. "I don't think I can do that again. Unfortunate, but I trust your judgment." Nizu tapped the edge of his teacup. Terrified? Is his quirk always active, or was he using it at that precise moment for some reason? What was he doing? Throwing a baseball. He was winding up for the pitch when I used my quirk. Made him fumble the throw. Smart. Not sure yet, but probably the former. Hard to say given the lack of data. Shoyuta shifted in his seat and adjusted his scarf. "I think Midoriya needs counseling." "We can't. It would single him out, as there's nothing obviously wrong with him. Not to mention we don't even know what his quirk is." We can't help him if we don't even know why he needs help. He was almost certainly bullied. Unless Midoriya comes forward with that information himself, we don't have proof. I can't just assign someone therapy because I suspect something's wrong, or I'd have half the school seeing Hound Dog on a weekly basis. Shoyuta gave the principal a skeptical look. Half? Really? Nizu sighed and sipped his tea. Todoroki Shoto, domestic abuse. Bakugo Katsuki, dangerously egocentric. Tokoyami fears his own quirk. Yaoyorozu has low self-confidence. Koda has anxiety issues. And the less I say about Mineta, the better. And that's before we get into what hero training will put them through. Nizu set his cup down and stared thoughtfully at his tea. If you're that worried about Midoriya, I'll arrange for counseling with the first compelling excuse I can find. And who knows? Maybe he'll open up to Hound Dog. Izuku was back in his seat when Shoyuta returned from Nizu's office. The red eyes and hunched expression as he read his book didn't go unnoticed by the teacher, and he immediately regretted not pressing Nizu harder on the counseling. Guilt wormed its way into his heart, and he found himself wondering what he could do to make it up to him. If he couldn't help him overcome his past traumas, maybe he could help him get physically stronger. I take it you've decided, he asked the class. Ida rose his hand. Yaoyorozu-san and I were chosen to represent the class. We will do our best, sir. Good. Yamada-sensei will be here in a bit for English. I'll see you all at the end of the day. Shoyuta didn't normally bother to check in on his students at the end of the day. Doing so was an irrational waste of time. Today, however, he needed a private word with a student. After Shoyuta dismissed his students, Midoriya lingered behind, perhaps already aware of what he was planning to ask. Bakugo lingered as well, glowering at Midoriya with an expression Shoyuta recognized all too well. But after a glance back at the teacher, Bakugo evidently decided to leave without making a scene. Once they were alone, Midoriya closed his book. Shoyuta caught the title before he shoved it in his bag and wondered how sign language had caught his interest. From the barcode on the cover, it was from UA's library. Shoyuta mentally shook himself, resolving to investigate it some other time, and tried to put on a friendly expression for Midoriya. Friendly expressions were not his forte. A word, if you don't mind. Midoriya glanced at him with smoldering eyes and a clenched jaw. Aizawa felt his heart twist at the sudden anger, but it was only logical that the boy hated him after what he had put him through. Shoyuta took a form from his desk and handed it to Midoriya. If you're serious about becoming a hero, you'll need to work on your physical conditioning. I'm willing to coach you after school hours. You'll need parent approval and— Thank you, Aizawa-sensei. His words were blunt and cold, betraying controlled anger beneath them. I'll have my mom sign it tonight. Nodding, Shoyuta said, We'll start tomorrow then. Meet me at Gym Gamma after class. Bring whatever weapons you're comfortable using. As Izuku left his classroom with his backpack clutched in his arms, an old habit to keep him from being grabbed by its straps, Shoyuta wondered if he could ever earn the boy's forgiveness. Izuku stared at the green cloth in his hands. It wasn't supposed to matter what hero costume he chose. He was supposed to get expelled on the first day and spend his miserable student life in general studies. But there he was, holding the hero costume he had designed when he was 6, getting ready to fight against real hero students. It looked and felt like the childish fantasy it was, impractical and gaudy, arrogant, even, given how much inspiration it drew from All Might's aesthetic. Just thinking about wearing it, the goofy plastic grin on the face mask, the oversized gloves, and worst of all, those green flaps of plastic sticking up like All Might's hair, made him want to rip it to pieces. Despite all that, even though he already knew what would replace that outfit, it felt right to indulge in his childhood fantasy for the upcoming fight. Once everyone had their costumes on, they went to ground beta. The grounds had been built in imitation of Mizutofu streets, complete with multi-story business complexes, cars parked in the streets, and working power lines crisscrossing the infrastructure. From a vantage point inside ground beta, the class could see the target building from multiple camera angles, along with the giant window overlooking the miniature city. The building for their training exercise towered over its neighbors, offering multiple points of entry on the lower floors, which had more spacious layouts, and forced students to fight in narrow corridors higher up. Elevator shafts, stairwells, emergency stairways, power lines, even the rugged concrete facade itself, all offered different avenues of reaching the target. Anyone defending the bomb would have to decide between covering entry points at the risk of letting someone sneak past them or hunkering down by the bomb and losing the advantage of holding a perimeter. Drawing lots from a coffee mug with the barcode still on the bottom, the students sorted themselves into pairs. Kota looked less than thrilled standing next to Izuku. "I'd hate to be the group going up against Bakugo and Todoroki," Kaminari said, shivering as one. A's two powerhouses held up strips of paper with J's at the end. "This seems quite arbitrary," Ida pointed out. "Are you sure this is the best way to assess our abilities?" Izuku said, "Heroes often have to work with whichever hero that happens to be on the scene with them. Making it random like this tests our adaptability and ability to coordinate with others." All Might looked relieved that Izuku had made the counterpoint. "Why, yes, exactly, young Midoriya. Well said." He cleared his throat. "Now, let's get the matches started. First up, we'll have Team C as the villains. Your job will be to guard the bomb hidden in the target building. You win by either holding out for 15 minutes or capturing both heroes with this capture tape." Izuku offered his partner a reassuring smile. Kota looked ready to shrink into his shoes as they walked forward. His classmates commented on how unlucky they were, and he even caught a stray whisper of someone hoping to go up against them. And the heroes, who are tasked with either incapacitating the villain team or securing the bomb before time runs out, will be Team J. Kaken smiled like Christmas had come early. Todoroki was staring at them as though they were a pile of laundry. Kota quivered and hid behind Izuku's back. Hushed whispers made a tumultuous background noise as All Might struggled to calm them down. "Come on, that's hardly fair," Uraraka said. All Might looked shaken by the one-sided matchup. "Well, maybe we should." "Should what?" Kaken roared. "Go easy on the quirkless Deku? If he wants to be a hero so fucking badly, then he needs to be ready to have his ass handed to him." "Watch your language," Ida said. "That's disrespectful to your classmate." "Like I give a shit." "Kaken's right," Izuku said, staring at his friend. "If I want to be a hero, I can't go easy on myself. People will be counting on me, and if I'm not strong enough to save them, what good am I?" All Might looked back and forth between the two teams. "Are you really sure about this? There's no shame in fighting someone closer to your skill level." Kota looked ready to beg for a new matchup. For his own part, Izuku felt sick to his stomach. Knowing what was about to happen, he couldn't help but want to curl up on the floor, beg All Might to put him in general studies, and go back to being the school's punching bag. But he couldn't. He was supposed to protect his classmates. Izuku smiled and said, "I'm sure." "Well, if you say so." All Might handed them 2 rolls of capture tape and wireless earbuds. "You have 15 minutes to prepare before the heroes arrive. The timer on the bomb will start counting down once you enter the building. After that, the heroes have 15 minutes to reach the bomb before time runs out." Kota fidgeted in silence as they took the elevator to the top floor. The bomb was at the far end of a wide-open room, empty save for a few concrete pillars supporting the roof and a pile of cardboard boxes in one corner. Izuku went to the circuit breaker next to the elevator and turned it off. "Your quirk allows you to control animals, right? Are there any around?" Kota shook his head. After some hesitation, he made gestures in sign language indicating he was mute. Izuku signed back that he was still learning, but he could understand him. A brief flash of happiness crossed Kota's features, but it vanished when the reality of their situation came back to him. "What about insects?" Izuku asked with hand signals. "Can you control them?" Kota cringed, shaking his head and hiding his face. Izuku put a reassuring hand on his shoulder and spoke softly to him. "Hey, everything's going to be okay. We can do this. We can win. But I'm going to need your help." Kota stared at him in disbelief, tears welling in the corners of his eyes. With shaking hands, he signed, "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I know Bakugo. He's going to run ahead and come straight for me. I can take him out, but I need to know which way he'll take. Can you find that out through some insects? There's bound to be a few around here." After some hesitation, Kota signed that he was too terrified of bugs to talk to them. Izuku knelt next to him and signed back that it was okay to be afraid, that he would be right there and make sure everything was all right. Looking into Izuku's calm, smiling face, Kota swallowed and went whispering for flies. Within minutes, he had a small swarm gathered in one corner of the room. Izuku helped him relay instructions, scattering flies across the floors and sending some outside to watch the perimeter. A few others served as runners, relaying messages back to Kota. The few mosquitoes he had found were on standby, hovering a safe distance away from them. All the while, Izuku kept a hand on his shoulder, telling him that they weren't going to hurt them. Everything was okay. He was doing a great job. Kota trembled throughout the process, but he didn't stop controlling the insects. All Might warned them over the intercom that their 15 minutes were up. As they went downstairs, Kota got updates from his network of flies and signed Kaken's location to Izuku. Without having to consult their map, Izuku led them to the hallway where he knew he'd fight Kaken. The whole structure, walls and floor alike, were lined with metal to keep the whole building from falling apart. The hallway was too narrow for Kaken to maneuver easily with his explosions. While they waited, Izuku assigned his plan to Kota. His partner looked ready to faint from panic, but after another reassuring smile, Kota hid himself behind a doorway. "Deku, where are you?" Kaken called, his voice echoing through the narrow hallway. Kota squeaked and shrank behind the doorway, but Izuku didn't twitch. He heard the footsteps coming closer, step by step, growing louder and louder as Kaken strolled through the building. Izuku kept his back to the entrance Kaken would take, knowing that his friend wouldn't resist the temptation to pounce when he wasn't looking. Izuku waited, hands limp at his sides, envisioning the moment Kaken will attack him. Die! Explosions from both palms boomed through the hallway, and the shockwave of them slapped against Izuku's back. As Kaken rocketed towards him, right arm cocked back for a punch, a manic grin on his face, Izuku waited, counting his heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Izuku pivoted his right foot back and turned. Entrenched in his vision of the future as Izuku was, it felt as though his limbs moved of their own accord. He swung his left fist in a massive roundhouse, meeting Kaken's eyes for the brief instant before it connected. It felt like he was punching a truck. The shock from the impact numbed his whole arm as it was thrown back. Blood gushed out, spattering the floor and walls with red flecks and drenching Izuku's hand. Izuku felt spikes of pain from 2 of his fingers as Kaken's nose crumpled under the impact. Kaken's own fist, sparking with nitroglycerin explosions, clipped Izuku's ear, singing the fabric around his head. While Kaken's head flew back, the rest of his body flew forward, flipping him over as he fell. The back of his head hit the ground with a gut-wrenching thunk. Groaning, Kaken tried to stand. Izuku sat Kaken up against a wall, took the radio out of his ear, and pried the gauntlets off his hands. "Deku," Kaken said between gritted teeth. "What the hell? Sorry, Kaken. I'm going to need these." Izuku removed his own top and tucked the green tracksuit behind Kaken's head. He took Kaken's arm-length gloves and put on his equipment. The grenade-like gear strained his shoulders, but he didn't let himself slouch. He pulled on the oversized steel handles on the gauntlets, exposing the firing pins underneath, and cocked them back in place. "Kota, help me tie him up." Kota stared at the 2 of them, mouth moving silently as his hands shook violently, unable to form coherent signs. When Izuku smiled and said it was all right, Kota took a deep breath, knelt with Izuku, and wrapped Kaken's wrists. "Bastard," Kaken said. His voice was growing faint. "You aren't supposed to be here. Just a pebble." "I know," Izuku whispered, "but I have to do this. Sorry, Kaken." Izuku gave Kota Kaken's extra grenades. The timid boy looked at them as though they'd explode any second. "We shouldn't need those," Izuku signed, "but we shouldn't leave Kaken with them." Into his radio, he asked All Might, "Can you send someone to get Bakukuin? I don't think he should stay here for the rest of the test." "The medical bots are on their way," All Might said back to them. "Continue with the test." "You haven't told Todoroki-san what happened, right?" "I haven't," All Might confirmed. "That would interfere with the test." They left Kaken sitting up against a wall, too weak and delirious to chase after them. The walk downstairs was silent, with Kota occasionally signing to Izuku that Todoroki was still waiting outside. When they made it to the ground level, Izuku and Kota took positions on either side of the door. Izuku signed his plan. Though Kota initially looked frightened, he looked at the gauntlets Izuku wore and nodded resolutely. Careful not to lean out too far, Izuku threw open the door. He waved at Todoroki and motioned for him to come inside. As Todoroki approached the door, Koda signed that he was coming and whispered to the mosquito he had found. Just before Todoroki made it inside, the mosquito bit him on the cheek. Todoroki swatted at the insect. At that moment of distraction, Izuku leapt out from behind the doorway. Todoroki's eyes widened as Izuku's fist headed towards his left side. Fire involuntarily sprang up, darting at Izuku. He let Kaken's flame-resistant gloves take the heat and scored a clean hit on Todoroki's chest. Reeling back, Todoroki slid across a sheet of ice and raised a giant wall in front of him. Izuku cocked the left gauntlet and pulled the pin. A deafening explosion erupted before him, flinging Izuku's arm back. The blast ripped apart Todoroki's wall, spraying bits of ice everywhere. While Todoroki was blinded, Izuku readied the second pin. He sprinted through the glittering haze of ice crystals, right arm pointing back, left hand gripping the pin by his 3 unbroken fingers. Rocket punch! He pulled the pin. Izuku twisted with the force of the explosion, driving his right arm into Todoroki's stomach with enough force to knock his feet out from under him. Todoroki rolled to a stop on the ground, wheezing and clutching his stomach. While he was still down, Izuku pulled out his capture tape and, ignoring the pain from his broken fingers, tied a knot around Todoroki's arms. It took 5 seconds before All Might called out, "Both members of Team C have been captured. The villains win." 2 more medical robots came for Todoroki, but he waved them away. Rolling to his knees, Todoroki tried to stand. Before he could fall, Izuku wrapped an arm under his right shoulder. "Let me help you up," Izuku said. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'll be fine," Todoroki said with a rasping voice. "Just winded." Izuku made some clumsy signs with his right hand. Koda ran out from his hiding place inside the building and took Todoroki's other shoulder. The robots followed along as they walked back to the observation deck. "So, you can use fire too?" Izuku asked. Todoroki's face hardened. "That was an accident. It won't happen again." "Is that why you have that scar?" Izuku winced. "Sorry, forget I asked." Izuku knew it wasn't the moment to have the conversation Todoroki needed, not with Koda on the other shoulder and the other students watching them from the observation deck. Gritting his teeth against the throbbing pain from his broken fingers and the burns on both hands, Izuku prepared himself to greet his classmates with a smile. Ojiro Mashireo didn't like the look in Midoriya's eyes as the green-haired youth calmly stared down Bakugo, who had the feral grin of a maniacal serial killer, and agreed to fight him. On paper, the quirkless student that had placed at bottom of their class in yesterday's assessment paired with Koda, whose quirk needed animals that were absent from the training ground, was a guaranteed loss against the 2 most powerful quirks in the class. But thinking back to the fact that Midoriya had nearly set a record on the entrance exam, and watching how he stared down his opponents without so much as a nervous twitch made Mashireo wonder if the quirkless kid had a plan to turn the tables on them. "Dude, this is going to be brutal," Kaminari whispered. "Do you think they'll be okay?" "All Might Sensei won't let it go too far," Shoji pointed out. "But it still doesn't feel right." "Well, he asked for it," Jiro said. "He'll only have himself to blame when he gets blown to pieces or turned into a popsicle," Sato added. "Well, I think he can do it." Their pink-skinned classmate waved her arms at the camera. "You can do it, Midoriya-kun. Show them what you got." Uraraka's face reddened as she added her own cheer. "Yeah, go Midoriya-san." Mineta glowered at the girls from his seat. "No fair," he grumbled. "He has his own cheerleading squad." Once the villains made it to the top floor, Midoriya started talking to Koda. The cameras caught their conversation, for all the good it did when they started speaking in sign language. "Wait, are they using hand signals?" Kirishima asked. "That's so cool. Looks like sign language, actually," Yayarosa chimed in. "It's actually a really smart idea. By using sign language, they can communicate without letting the enemy know or giving away their position." "I wish I knew what they were talking about, Karo." "I too. Wish I had learned sign language. I admire their diligence. Learning such a useful skill before coming to school shows excellent foresight." "I don't think it'll work for me," Hagakure said, waving her hands. "No one will be able to see my hands." "You're wearing gloves," Kaminari said. "We can see just fine." "Oh, right." When All Might announced that the heroes could enter, Bakugo sprinted through the doors, leaving Todoroki behind, shouting for Todoroki not to get in his way. After watching his partner leave, Todoroki made himself a chair of ice and sat in front of the doors. Doesn't seem like they're working together. Do they really have to? Either one could take both of them. Wait, they're leaving the bomb? Yaoyorozu asked. What if Bakugo goes around them? Seems like a reckless plan on their part. Mashireo looked at the villain's camera feed. Both Midoriya and Koda were heading downstairs. On the digital layout of the building, with each student marked with a color dot, he saw that they were both heading straight for Bakugo. I'm not sure I want to watch. I hope he doesn't get hurt too badly. It was over almost too quickly for Mashireo to process. Bakugo blasted himself across the hallway, pouncing like a panther towards Midoriya's back. In a fluid turn, Midoriya moved aside at the last possible second and raised his own fist directly in Bakugo's path. The sharp, meaty smack that came over the speakers, followed by the metallic thud of Bakugo's head hitting the floor, silenced the whole crowd. Mashireo felt his stomach heave, watching blood gush from Bakugo's broken nose. An unspoken question hung in the air, a collective wondering if the rest of the combat training will entail blood and broken bones, conveyed in slackened jaws, nervous sideways glances, and apprehensive stares at All Might. Once Midoriya helped Bakugo into a sitting position, the silence broke like a dam. Midoriya, that was so manly. I think I'm going to be sick. Dude, was that Bakugo's nose we heard? So flashy. I'm a bit jealous. How did he punch so hard? What a mad banquet of darkness. I'm actually kind of scared of Midoriya now, Zero said. Wait, Kaminari said. Bakugo's the one that blasted himself across a hallway shouting die. And you're scared of the quirkless kid? Well, yeah. He wasn't the one that had his nose broken with one punch. Okay, that's fair. Midoriya's punch bothered Ojiro. If Izuku's crooked fingers were any indication, he hadn't balled up his fingers correctly, a sure sign he had no idea how to throw a punch, yet his reaction was perfectly timed, whirling when it was too late for Bakugo to change course, his fist aimed correctly without even looking, and his footing set wide enough to keep Bakugo's sheer momentum from knocking him over. Ojiro watched All Might, wondering what their teacher's reaction would be. For a fraction of a second, his ever-present smile faltered. Staring at one of his students bleeding out on the floor, he looked out of his depth. He flipped through his Teaching for Dummies book, fingers shaking as he turned each page. Looking back at the screens, Ojiro saw Midoriya take off his shirt. Cold horror gripped his chest as he saw the burn marks that covered Izuku's arms and back, but judging by the class's reactions, they had missed that detail. He's making sure Bakugo is comfortable, Ida said. Very commendable. And he's doing exactly what you're supposed to do for someone with a broken nose, Yaoyorozu said. Disarming him is also smart. Wait, he's putting on Bakugo's costume? Sato asked. Is that allowed? I don't see why not, Azui said. But does he even know how to use them? Midoriya, checking the pins on Bakugo's gauntlets, quickly answered that question. Ojiro could tell that Midoriya and Bakugo spoke to each other, but they were both speaking too quietly for the cameras to pick up. Midoriya's voice over the radio snapped All Might out of his shock. Galvanized to action, All Might had the medical robots take a hidden service elevator to get Bakugo while Midoriya and Koda headed downstairs. Do you think he's going to beat Todoroki too? Shoji asked. No way, Mineta said. He just got lucky with Bakugo. It doesn't look like Todoroki realizes what happened to Bakugo, Yaoyorozu said. Maybe they could ambush him, but it'll be nearly impossible to beat his quirk. Ambush was exactly what Midoriya had in mind, judging from how he and Koda set themselves up around the front doors. Todoroki was still sitting on his throne of ice, watching the building with an impassive expression and checking the time, while the villains exchanged a last set of hand signals. With a gauntlet hand, Midoriya opened the front doors and waved at Todoroki, motioning him to come inside. A collection of gasps rose from the students as Todoroki watched the waving hand. No way, he's not going to fall for that, is he? Todoroki stood, melting the chair with a wave of his hand, and went towards the door. Oh my god, he is. That has to be the stupidest, yet most incredible plan ever. Doesn't seem very manly though. What darkness lies beyond that door? Todoroki paused just before entering. At first, Ojiro thought he had noticed the trap, but it turned out a mosquito had bitten him. Midoriya chose that exact moment of distraction to spring the ambush. As Midoriya threw his punch, fire leapt up from Todoroki's left side, scorching the stolen gauntlets. Wait, he can do fire too? Jiro asked. How OP is his quirk? A wall of ice rose impossibly fast between Todoroki and Midoriya, but a single explosion turned it to dust. As Midoriya shouted the name of his improvised attack, a second explosion threw his fist into Todoroki's stomach. The whole fight was over so quickly it took 5 seconds for All Might to call Midoriya's win. Midoriya already has a super move, but that wasn't even his own gear. His brightness is almost as dazzling as mine. I call dibs. Ishido's shout brought the excited conversations to a screeching halt. Dibs? Kirishima asked. Dibs on what? Midoriya. Dibs. I'm calling it. Hagakure wrapped an arm around Ishido's shoulder. Ooh, you're going to ask him out? Yep. He's totally my type. Kirishima gave her an uneasy smile and a rock-hard thumbs up. Well, go get him, Mina-chan. Thanks, Eiji-kun. Mashireo felt his heart go out to Kirishima. Judging by Ishido's easy smile and casual attitude, she had no idea he had a crush on her. Meanwhile, Mineta was sobbing into his shirt and shaking with rage, muttering to himself about how unfair it was that the quirkless kid had better luck than he did. For him, Mashireo felt no sympathy. Midoriya and Koda each held one of Todoroki's shoulders as they entered the observation deck. After gently setting him in a chair, they stood next to All Might at the front of the class. Excellent job on the exercise. I'm impressed with the creativity and tenacity you have shown, Midoriya. Now, can anyone tell me why Todoroki and Bakugo lost? Ida's hand snapped into the air. They were completely lacking in teamwork. Bakugo charged into the building without a plan, while Todoroki waited outside, providing no support to his teammate. Had they stayed together, I don't believe Midoriya would have had a way to win against Todoroki's ice. Well said, Ida. It's important for heroes to work together and communicate in the field. People's lives depend on how well you can coordinate a rescue response and contain a villain. Now, does anyone have any suggestions on how Midoriya and Koda could improve? Silence greeted the question. Mashireo was tempted to point out Midoriya's broken fingers, but Yaoyorozu raised her hand. Staring directly at Midoriya, she said, "It was reckless to leave the bomb undefended. Had you failed to intercept Bakugo, or if Todoroki had decided to enter the building by a different route, they would have easily taken the objective." Very true, Midoriya said coolly, meeting Yaoyorozu's stare. It's a good thing we knew exactly what Bakugo and Todoroki were doing. Yaoyorozu was taken aback. How? Midoriya glanced at his partner, and he made hand signs in response. Koda asked some flies to watch them both. We knew which stairs Bakugo was taking, and we knew Todoroki was waiting outside. Midoriya smiled and added, "We would have never won against them if it wasn't for Koda." Koda blushed and hid his face behind his hands. Midoriya turned back to Yaoyorozu and asked, "Do you have any other concerns?" Yaoyorozu scowled for a fraction of a second before her face was back to its usual impassive, calm expression. "Yes, you were excessively forceful against your classmates. One had to be carried off on a stretcher, and the other's lucky he doesn't have any broken ribs. That first explosion could have easily killed Todoroki. Furthermore, if this was a real combat scenario, Bakugo would not have been well enough to be left alone." To that last point, heroes can't always hover around an injured civilian. Sometimes, they have to leave someone for rescue later so they can apprehend a villain actively targeting other bystanders. I made sure Bakugo would be stable until backup arrived and left to deal with an uncontained threat. To the others, we're training to be heroes. Injuries happen. Villains aren't going to hold back. I don't want to hurt anyone, but if it's to protect others, I will. All Might hastily shoved his book in his back pocket and stepped between them. All right, we can discuss the specifics of this later. For now, we should send the next groups out there. Actually, can I go to the nurse's office? Midoriya asked, holding up his left hand. I broke 2 fingers. Yes, of course. More surprised mutters and odd whispers came from the students as All Might's eyes darted across the room. Could you take Todoroki as well? We should have Recovery Girl check on him just in case. Sure. Todoroki-san, can you walk? Todoroki tried to stand, but he winced and fell back in the seat. Still hurts, he said in a rasping voice. Mashireo stood and offered Todoroki a hand. All Might Sensei, is it all right if I go with them? While All Might hesitated, Midoriya said, Thanks, I appreciate it. All Might cleared his throat and added, Yes, of course. Come straight back once you get there. alright? I don't want you missing out on this class. With Todoroki leaning on one shoulder as they walked through UA's empty halls, Masahiro wondered what he was trying to learn from Midoriya. Was he genuinely concerned about a classmate with way too many scars for a minor? Did he think Midoriya was hiding something from everyone? What questions could he even ask? All Masahiro knew was that he needed answers. Todoroki Shoto wasn't sure how to classify this new emotion he was feeling. There was a whole lot of abdominal pain, but that was probably the nitroglycerin-powered punch that Midoriya had rammed into his gut. He also felt lightheaded, which may or may not have had anything to do with the fact that he couldn't breathe anything deeper than a mouthful of air without prompting another bout of the aforementioned abdominal pain. Neither of those experiences were particularly new, as Endeavor was fond of going for gut punches to teach him to keep his guard up. Gut punches tended to leave fewer broken bones, and the bruises were easier to hide. The new feelings were more of a confused knot of anger, shame, and giddiness, as though a kitten had taken the neatly wound yarn balls of emotion lying in the dust-coated hamper in the forgotten corner of his mind and batted them across his head, leaving everything tangled together. Bearing that metaphor in mind, Shoto decided to spin the slow, arduous walk to Recovery Girl's office, trying to untangle his emotions. The shame was simple enough. Shame he lost to the quirkless kid. Shame all it took was a pair of gloves and the wave of a hand to lure him right into a trap. Shame he let something so petty as a mosquito bite distract him at the worst possible moment. Though now he thought about it, that had to be Koda's doing. Shame he used Endeavor's fire, even though he had sworn not to. And there was the anger again. Not at Midoriya, not at Bakugo either, no, at himself. The training exercise hadn't particularly mattered to him, so it didn't make sense for him to be angry he had lost, except for this nagging sense that he wasn't supposed to lose, not to someone so weak. How was he supposed to prove to Endeavor that he didn't need his fire if he couldn't even win with both powers? The giddiness came anytime he thought about Endeavor's reaction. Losing to someone near his level would have been enough for Endeavor to spend a month training him until his bones turned to jelly. Him losing to someone without a quirk might make Endeavor furious enough to burn himself to a crisp. Shoto wondered if it would be better to tell Endeavor himself, or wait for him to find out through whatever contacts he had at UA. Are you still feeling okay? Ojiro asked. We're almost there. Shoto looked over at the classmate carrying him by the shoulder. Nothing's broken. Bakugo was laid down in one of the beds. Dried, crusted blood was smeared across his face, and his nose was wrapped in thick gauze bandages. As Ojiro set Todoroki down at another bed, Recovery Girl came back in with a damp towel. Just how many kids is All Might going to send me today? She said as she pulled up Todoroki's shirt. Shoto winced as she prodded and poked at his gut, but the pain was mild enough to endure without making a sound. Nothing's broken, sweetie. Have a gummy. Let that ice for 10 minutes and head back to class. The purple gummy bear she handed him tasted like cough medicine. It left his chest with a tingling, energized sensation as it hit his stomach. Ojiro offered him an ice pack, but Shoto made his own ice. Recovery Girl examined Midoriya next. Gloves off, please. Ojiro had to help Midoriya with the right glove. As the skin-tight black fabric slid off, revealing a patchwork quilt of scars, Shoto felt his eyes widen. He followed the scars up Midoriya's shoulder, over to his back, and wondered how he hadn't noticed earlier. Thin lines, jagged scratches, and burn marks. So many burn marks, some the size of a thumbprint, some bigger than his hand. None quite as vivid and pronounced as Shoto's own scar, but eye-catching through their sheer quantity. The skin from his knuckles to his elbow was an angry shade of red, with the faint beginning of a blister forming on the back of his hand. Recovery Girl's eyes roamed across the scars before snapping back to the burn. Second degree, I think. I have some cream and painkillers for that. No point in wasting my quirk. It'll blister a bit. Just leave it alone and it'll be fine. Bakugo's gloves must have helped. Endeavor's flames usually burn to the bone. Midoriya managed the other glove himself, though not without visible discomfort as he gently pried the glove off his hand. Two crooked fingers didn't quite bend with the rest of his hand. Recovery Girl sked and puckered her lips. Midoriya's fingers twitched and straightened as the bones in them mended back together. 2 students with broken bones in 10 minutes. That has to be a record. I really ought to have a word with him. It was my fault, Midoriya said. Sorry about that. Learn from your mistakes. There's only so many times I can speed up your healing before you're too exhausted to move. I will, thanks. Midoriya set a hand on Bakugo's bed. How is he? Concussion, broken nose, nasty lump on the back of his head. Recovery girl squeezed cum cream out of a tube and slathered it on Midoriya's burned hand. Let All Might know he'll be out for the rest of the day. Got it. Midoriya took the tube of burn cream Recovery girl offered him and went to the door. As he was leaving, he turned around and asked, "Hey Todoroki-san, want to get soba sometime?" The only two words that initially registered in Shoto's mind were want and soba. Without thinking about it, he said, "Sure. How does 5 on Friday sound? I'll have training with Aizawa-sensei after class, but I can do it after that." The full extent of Midoriya's quest had finally percolated through Shoto's brain. Even then, knowing that Midoriya had just invited him to eat soba, he had no idea what the request entailed. No one had ever asked if he wanted to go anywhere before. Was it something friends did? Were they friends now? Shoto admitted to himself he didn't know anything about friendships, but he was pretty sure they didn't start with a punch to the stomach, or he and Endeavor would be friends 1,000 times over. Was it the scar? Did Midoriya still want to know the story behind his scar? Was Midoriya willing to share his own? Did he even want to know? His first impulse was to refuse, saying that he had training after school as well. As he thought about it, he realized it came with two benefits. One, he wouldn't have to go home until late in the evening, missing a day of Endeavor's training, and two, soba. His eyes wandered back to Midoriya's arms, then to Midoriya's face. Midoriya showed no sign of emotion, no anger, no happiness, no worry. It had been that way before and during the fight as well. Two broken fingers, and not a trace of a grimace the entire time. It felt like he was looking in a mirror. Sure, I can do that. Great. I'll get you my phone number later. Watching Midoriya leave, Shoto had given up on understanding his emotions. For now, he decided to sit back, let the ice numb his bruised stomach, and wonder if the soba would be chilled. With just the two of them in the hallways, Mashireo knew it was now or never, but he still didn't know what to ask. Going straight for the scars felt far too blunt, and odds were, Midoriya would refuse to answer him. Given the fact Midoriya was quirkless, Mashireo had the uneasy feeling he had some idea of why he had gotten them anyways, which left his other question. As they approached ground beta, Mashireo took a deep breath, as if he were crouching into a forward stance. "How did you know when to turn around?" Midoriya stopped. Mashireo continued a few steps before reeling himself back. With a neutral expression that betrayed no hint of discomfort or confusion, Midoriya asked, "What do you mean?" "When Bakugo lunged at you," Mashireo said, "you turned at the perfect moment and had your fist in the perfect spot. I know you had Koda telling you where he was, but there's no way hand signals would give you that much information that quickly." Midoriya rummaged in his track pants pocket and took out a journal. The cover had the reflective sheen of a product fresh off the shelf, and on the front, in black marker, was written 1A. "I've known Kaken since we were kids," Midoriya said as he flipped through the journal's empty pages. "His quirk, his temperament, fighting style, everything. I made notes of everything I thought would be important." Midoriya handed him the journal. On one page was Bakugo's face, glaring at him through rough pencil lines and graphite shading. For a quick sketch, it captured Bakugo's sour, egocentric personality very well. A second sketch showed a full-body portrait, though the limbs were left as single strokes of the pencil. The other page had a staggering analysis of Bakugo's strengths and weaknesses, in terms of his quirk, overall physical conditioning, and state of mind. So much crammed into tiny text that it made Mashireo's eyes hurt looking at it. "Your drawing's very good. It's just a rough sketch. I was waiting for our hero costumes before putting the finishing touches." Mashireo flipped to the next page. It was empty. As he was about to hand it back, curiosity got the better of him. The journal was labeled 1A, and Bakugo's entry was about 30 pages in. He flipped to the beginning and found Aoyama's roughly drawn face staring smugly back at him, with sparkles drawn in to capture his vanity. His notes were no less detailed, though a quick read showed it was more speculation than hard facts. Despite that, Midoriya had already noted Aoyama's inability to change the output of his quirk and speculated on using mirrors and lenses as support items. "They're in alphabetical order," Midoriya said. Mashireo, startled, closed the book and held it towards him. "Sorry, I shouldn't have looked. No, it's fine. It'd be nice to see what someone else thinks of my analysis. Somewhat perturbed, Masahiro flipped until he found his own name. Midoriya had noted his excellent physical conditioning and correctly guessed that he had martial arts training. Reading further, Masahiro found the flaws in his fighting style, a lack of ranged options, and the inability to combat more impressive strength augmentation quirks, along with suggestions of support items to correct both issues. You think I should use Ebola? Excellent way to incapacitate fleeing villains, Midoriya said. Non-lethal and low risk of injury. Can be used to tie up villains, and in a pinch, it could serve as a close-range weapon. Makes use of your excellent physical conditioning and impressive throwing ability. With practice, your tail could throw them, surprising opponents that are focused on your arms. And the tonfa or eskrima sticks for opponents with blades. You won't be able to dodge easily in crowds and close quarters, so having a way to block is important. A sturdy enough weapon can let you crack hardening quirks like Kirishima's, and these are less likely to kill as well. You've done this for the entire class? How did you get this much? Yesterday's test gave me a lot to work with. I'll add more as I see more of what everyone can do. Masahiro counted the empty pages. With as much detail as Midoriya could cram into a single page, he likely had enough space to last the entire year. Out of curiosity, Masahiro flipped forward, looking through the M's. Midoriya had a section of his own. His sketch was much more detailed, both the profile and full body, with colors penciled in. Midoriya's eyes stared out from behind a plastic visor, and his hair was left loose. The full body shot showed a different hero costume, a form-fitting tracksuit with muted green colors, fingerless gloves, a black belt with pouches, and padded shoes. Midoriya was no less thorough on his self-analysis, citing his quirklessness and highlighting his inferior physical conditioning, while stating his ability to analyze quirks and his research into hero work, along with the likelihood of being underestimated by his opponents, as his chief advantages. Towards the bottom, Midoriya had made a list of self-improvements he wished to make, improving his stamina, getting a ranged weapon, and learning martial arts. You even analyzed yourself? Masahiro asked. It's important to know where you start and what you can work on. Midoriya gave him a sad smile. I have a long way to go compared to everyone else. You beat Todoroki and Bakugo. I'd say you don't have much to worry about. A stunt like that only works once. If I want to stay in the hero course, I need to learn how to fight. With a wry smile, Midoriya added, without breaking fingers, preferably. Well, you could always ask one of the teachers, or you could try finding a dojo off campus. Come to think of it, didn't you say you'd be training with Aizawa-sensei that day? Actually, I was wondering if you'd be willing to show me some beginner moves. Eraserhead specializes in Wing Chun, for more defensive fighting if cornered, which I intend to learn, but I'd like to try Jujutsu. Why? I'm just another student. I doubt that green belt is just for show, Midoriya said, pointing at the belt over Masahiro's GI. It's fine if you don't want to. I just thought it would be a good way to get to know a classmate better. And get more notes for your journal, Masahiro added in a defensive tone. I'd be willing to show you what I write down. It's only fair. If I come up with anything else I think would help you, I'd be happy to share it as well. Masahiro still felt uncomfortable around Midoriya. Between his unexpressive face and affable demeanor, he couldn't tell what was going on in Midoriya's head, and judging by all the scars and his lack of a reaction to breaking fingers, he had to have been through some serious abuse. At the same time, he couldn't deny that Midoriya had been open and honest with him about his observations and seemed genuine in his wish to spend time together. In the end, the opportunity to observe more of his classmates' behavior, to assess how much of a danger Midoriya posed, swayed his decision. I suppose I could show you some basic stances, Masahiro said. Great. How does Saturday at 5 sound? More training with Aizawa? You shouldn't overdo it. It's just basic stances, right? Shouldn't be too taxing. Masahiro mulled it over. While exercising too much could hurt Midoriya, he could keep the exercises light for a martial arts beginner. I suppose. Make sure he knows about it. I will. Swap phone numbers after class? Trying to collect the entire class contact information? Midoriya chuckled and said, my journal wouldn't be complete without it. Masahiro couldn't tell if he was joking or not. Once Midoriya returned to the classroom, Ashido Mina waved him over to the empty seat next to her, which had once been Kirishima's. Midoriya took the seat and brought out a journal. His eyes were glued to the screen as he made sketches on a page. Curious, Mina leaned over and saw Midoriya drawing the features of Kirishima's hero costume. When Kirishima and Sato clashed, the latter cracking Kirishima's hardened body with a sugar-powered punch, Midoriya made some quick side notes next to the drawing. "Wow, you're really good," Mina said, keeping her voice low so All Might wouldn't hear. "Thanks," Midoriya muttered back. "I've been waiting for the hero costumes to finish my sketches." Mina leaned closer, letting her shoulder rub up against him. "That's a lot of detail you're putting on the abs. You wouldn't happen to be into guys, would you?" Mina's teasing statement got a couple strangled gasps out of Kaminari and Ida, but Midoriya didn't even flinch at the question. "The drawings help me visualize how people use their quirk. More detail means I might see something I'd otherwise miss." Mina mentally cheered. Midoriya's confident, bold, and knows how to handle her banter. If he knew how to party, she'd call him her perfect match. She studied him closely, searching for clues on how to steer the conversation. He kept drawing, but she could see him glance her way every so often. "What about me? Have you drawn me yet?" Midoriya flipped towards the front of the journal. The sketch was still rough, but Mina stared in fascination at her bubbly, cheerful smile staring back at her. "Ooh, I like it." Lowering her voice, she asked in a mock-serious tone, "You didn't get a peek in the locker rooms for your sketches, did you?" From the way Jiro's jacks twitched and the glare she sent at Midoriya, she had picked up on that question. Mina winced, hoping she didn't just get Midoriya in trouble, but he handled her question with impeccable poise. "Who do you think I am, my Netta?" "I'm working off memory from the quirk test yesterday." Jiro relaxed in her seat, and Mina let out the breath she had been holding. "That has to be challenging, though, right?" "It is, but for the finer details, I'll ask for footage from today's lesson." "They let us look at that?" "Of course." Midoriya gestured at the screens. Currently, Kirishima was stuck in Ciro's tape, but Aoyama cut him free with his laser. "The school website uploads videos of class activities like these so we can learn from our classmates." "Wait, can anyone watch these?" Shoji asked. Two of his tentacles had sprouted ears, and a third held a mouth right next to Midoriya. "Anyone with a school ID," Midoriya answered to one of the ears. "If the videos go public, the school needs your permission first." All Might, finally noticing the conversation, cleared his throat and said, "Please hold your comments until the end of the combat exercise. We will discuss it together once they get back." As silence returned to the room, Mina stared sullenly at All Might's back. The conversation had gotten derailed, and now she had lost her chance to find out more about Midoriya's hobbies. Risking one last whisper, she asked, "Want to hang out sometime?" "Sure. Swap numbers later." All Might turned back around, putting a prompt end to their conversation. But once he had gone back to the screen and Midoriya was buried back in his journal, Mina pumped her fist. Her excitement was somewhat diminished when, after math class, she wasn't the only one waiting outside Ectoplasm's room. "So, you swing both ways, Midoriya-chan?" Mina asked with a mischievous smile. Todoroki gave her a bland, puzzled look, while Ojiro reddened visibly. Midoriya, unflappable as ever, simply said, "I don't think so. Haven't really thought about it." Once they went their separate ways, Mina's phone got a text, suggesting Machi on Sunday. Mina immediately said yes and headed home with a bounce in her step. Power Loader was busy resigning himself to an extra 3 hours watching over his new problem student when a knock came at the support lab's doors. Midoriya, dismissed from extra training by Eraserhead on account of having burns and stamina drain from broken fingers, instead used his time after school to get his hands on new support equipment. "Midoriya, right? Something I can do for you?" Power Loader asked in a bored tone. "My hero costume got covered in blood during combat training today," Midoriya answered. "Put in a request. Yours was pretty simple, so we should have something whipped up by tomorrow." "Actually, I was hoping to make some adjustments. I have some material specs and color schemes I wanted to implement. I would also appreciate it if I could discuss possible support items with one of your students." Power Loader looked back nervously, where the one student that had refused to leave the premises was feverishly working on her next volatile experiment. "Well, most of the students have gone home already, which means at least one is still here. Can I talk to them for a minute?" Power Loader weighed his options. While he technically was supposed to let his students help heroes in training design their gear and only step in to make sure the new equipment wouldn't get students killed in the field, He felt tempted to spare the young, vulnerable-looking Midoriya the danger of approaching his problem student. Splitting the difference, Power Loader said, "You could always come back tomorrow, when there are more students around. You might find someone better suited to designing what you need. I'm sure we can work something out. I need new gear as soon as possible." Power Loader sighed and flung open the door. "She's in the back. Watch her step around her." The jetpack she was designing today blew up half the lab. He was hoping that offhand comment would be enough to scare off Midoriya, but he didn't seem fazed in the slightest by the prospect of handling anything that could explode at any moment. Instead, he thanked Power Loader and went straight towards the sounds of welding torches and power sanders. Power Loader followed the kid, partly because he had nothing better to do, mostly to make sure he didn't have to file an incident report. As they approached Hatsum's workstation, the canister of compressed, flammable gases she was welding to a metal plate sprung a leak. She dove for cover, killing the heat on the welding torch, but a stray spark ignited the gas. With a deafening bang, the canister blew its top off. A clump of metal shrapnel the size of a fist sailed close enough to the Midoriya's head to ruffle his hair. Yet he didn't even flinch. "Instead of welding the tanks onto the plate, you should make holders for the tanks," Midoriya said. "That way, you can swap them out with fresh canisters." Hatsum looked up from her hiding spot under the workbench, her goggles zooming in and out as they focused on Midoriya's face. "Hatsume," she said as she clambered onto her feet. "Maybe later in the development cycle," Hatsum said. "I wanted a proof of concept first." "You're not going to get a proof of concept if it keeps blowing up on you." The student examined the framework of the jetpack, which still had smoke drifting off it. "A jetpack's a great idea. Adds maneuverability to a hero's kit. There are a lot of heroes that could use something like this." Hatsum rushed forward and grabbed the student by the shoulders, all but crushing him with her chest as she brought him face to face. "I know, right? Everyone was saying that grapnel hooks were more practical, but how boring is that? Plus, a grapnel hook wouldn't work in open spaces." "Exactly. Plus, with a jetpack, a hero can do a flying headbutt. Imagine how awesome that would be." "It would be awesome." The student took a journal out of his backpack and got a pencil ready. "I need some kind of long-range weapon, and I was wondering if you could help me with that." "You want to make babies with me?" Hatsum asked excitedly. Power Loader inwardly groaned, ready to explain to the poor kid Hatsum's meaning, but the kid answered in a calm voice, "I would appreciate it." "Ooh, let me guess. Attack drones with boxing gloves?" "Imagine swarming your enemies with hordes of flying punching robots." "I was thinking something handheld, a gun that fires a second gun." "Imagine the trick shots you could do with that baby. Non-lethal, rubber bullets?" "Ooh, that explode into sticky goo, snaring your target, something that can help me grab things." Hatsum frowned. "That kind of sounds like a grappling gun." She hummed to herself in frustration before shouting in delight and slamming her hand on the workbench. "Give me 1 second." Hatsum returned with a 6-foot length of cable, some duct tape, and a wad of grip plastic. After taping everything together, she slapped the cord against the wall, letting the plastic end stick. An experimental tug had it clinging to the wall. "Is it safe on people?" Midoriya asked as he examined the adhesive material. In response, Hatsum peeled the prototype off the wall and flung it at Midoriya, catching him in the face. With some care, the plastic peeled off without leaving a mark. "Any way we can get it to unstick remotely?" Hatsum was long gone, scrambling for parts around the workshop. "Could do something with an electrical current. Send a wire through the cable. Air pressure. Use the grappling guns as a base. I can have it ready by tomorrow." "Great. Thank you, Hatsum-san. We can meet up right after class ends." Hatsum grunted in reply as she tore apart a stock grappling hook. Power Loader, stunned by how well Midoriya had handled his most eccentric student, followed him numbly back to his office. "I would discuss costume changes with you, right? Would you mind if we went over the new specs?" "Sure, kid." Power Loader got himself a cup of coffee and resigned himself to a long night. "Whatever you need."
Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-ifs coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Goodbye everyone.